I think it's time to take that last breath.
Yeah. It feels like it was all just very personal to John Cena.
I almost see like this year, 2025 WWE, like 1998 WCW.
Saying in 2025 that Dave Meltzer tells the most accurate story of pro wrestling is truly as asinine of a statement than something that Dave Meltzer himself would make. So all of last week, everyone was crapping all over the booking for John Cena's last match against Gunther, in which he tapped out to Gunther, even though it was pretty clear that it would be all John Cena's idea. Well, since then, he has talked about that last match and his perspective on why they did what they did.
Just in a sleeper hold. But we're having that conversation with the audience.
Yeah.
So as I essentially take my last breath, I have struggled. If you think of somebody, the natural causes scenario, or however we picture loss in our life, all of us have been through it. They struggle, they hang on just long enough to make sure to say goodbye to everybody that's been meaningful in their lives. And that whole day was so many unbelievably vulnerable, meaningful conversations.
Yeah.
And then you realize I've connected with everybody I love.
Yeah.
Physically, I feel great. I think it's time to take that last breath.
Yeah. Cena comparing that last match to like when a person takes his last breath of life after saying goodbye to loved ones. It feels like it was all just very personal to John Cena when it comes to his career and the business and the fans. And that's why I never really hated on it in the first place, because to me it was always clear that it was John Cena's way out and the way that John Cena wanted to go out. So I'm glad he got to say his piece on that last match, even though if all the build-up to that last match could have been much better. My entire problem with John Cena's farewell tour was that the storylines just weren't there, and it was definitely a lazy way to go by Triple H and the WWE overall. But as for the booking in the last match, it's what Cena wanted, and that's the way he wanted to go out. Now, since then, Gunther has also tried to do some defending of Cena, which I found a bit interesting if we want to listen to some of his interview.
Sometimes it's a little bit funny with fans to me, because all in this last run that Cena had, especially the second half of it, people were so... Yeah, the connection people had to him is just amazing. I think I've never seen something like that.
So Gunther's giving a lot of credit for the connection that Cena had with the fans in his going away tour, which was to be expected. He was the biggest thing in wrestling for a very long time. Though what Gunther is going to go on to do in this interview is to try and say that the fans used to boo Cena and that they're hypocrites, which I get is... I'm assuming Gunther in character, but it would be nice if Gunther could just always be fully in character. If they would just go all the way with this Gunther that just wants to make pro wrestling pure, ruin the entertainers. You know, they did that when he first came up to the main roster, but they have not gone all in since. But let's listen to what he says, because what he says is actually not completely true, though.
But it's also funny when you think back, I don't know, like, when was that, 10, 15 years or something like that, maybe even longer. He was the most hated guy on the whole roster. He was a babyface, but he went out there and he got booed everywhere he went. People complained that he got shoved down their throats and whatever. And here we are, 10, 15 years later, and people act like it never happened. And the situation never existed, and now they all love him. Bit hypocritical if you ask me sometimes.
So I do think him, calling the fans hypocrites has to be him being in character. His example, not completely true though. I don't think Cena was ever the most hated person on the roster. Yes, he had half the fans turn on him once upon a time because they were in fact sick of him being shoved down their throats, but outside of a few times like ECW One Night Stand where the crowd was completely against him. I think there was a match against Edge when they were in Canada where the crowd was completely against him. What made that run by Cena work was that half the crowd hated him, wanted him to lose, half the crowd still loved him, and that actually helped make him even bigger when it came to professional wrestling. Now, one of the people we talked about last week who did try and jump on the train of hating on that Cena's last match and the booking of the last match was Jeff Jarrett, who many people online have been pointing out that he too had his own little retirement story at the beginning of the year in AEW, and then it just disappeared. Like most AEW storylines tend to do, there's no consistency to them, and they either just fall apart or go nowhere. And that was one of those things. So once again, Jeff Jarrett commenting on Cena's last matches is laughable to me. Jeff Jarrett should never be the person commenting on a heel going over, because the early years of TNA, he went over on all the baby faces, some of which he definitely should not have gone over on if they were trying to really build something special in the early days of TNA. But a lot of those booking decisions is what made TNA have some hiccups on pay-per-view and getting actual good TV deals until Jeff Jarrett kind of took a step back, and then suddenly TNA's stuff started working a little better. So I don't know, Jeff Jarrett was just laughable to me, being one of the people attacking Cena's last match booking. Another person we talked about last week was, of course, Dave Meltzer, and Dave Meltzer is one of the people that makes me laugh the most in pro wrestling, actually. It's not that I'm laughing with him, though. It's that I'm always laughing at him. Somebody commented on my video last week, if you think Dave Meltzer's dumb, why do you watch him? I don't watch his shows. I watch the videos and the audio that pop up on my Twitter feed so that I can laugh at him, because he is one of the biggest idiots in pro wrestling history. I don't think I've ever heard anyone else in pro wrestling say more stupid shit than Dave Meltzer. Now, in his quest to always try and dog on the WWE to help AEW, he is trying to compare modern WWE, or this past year, 2025 WWE, to 1998 WCW.
I almost see like this year, 2025 WWE, like 1998 WCW. Okay. 1998 WCW was actually their most successful year they ever had. Yet most people will point to Sting not beating Hogan and that travesty at Starrcade as the beginning of the end. Yet the argument is like, but the next year was even bigger.
The whole thing here is him trying to compare that 1998 was a great year for WCW money-wise. And I think if we take his comparison on the money, which is what I think he's trying to do, like the money the company is making, WWE making record money, WCW at that point making record money, and then the next year, the only thing that saved WCW was Goldberg, and the only thing that saved WWE this year was John Cena. My problem with this comparison is bringing up the fact that this was the beginning of the end for WCW, and that's what killed WCW. And he's trying to compare that to like this is going to kill the WWE, and it's a bad comparison, because to where WWE is right now, it's eons bigger and different than where WCW was back then. And even though I question how WWE has become such this hot entity when it comes to getting TV network deals, because the ratings don't always seem to be there, they do still get those network deals, and that's just not going away anytime soon. So I don't like him making this comparison to bring back some of the reasons why WCW died. Like, I feel like what is happening with the journalism with pro wrestling, and I use that word very loosely because they're not actual journalists, is a lot of them get paid off by Tony Khan. They do. And now we see them trying to dog on WWE because they did have a very bad year creatively, and they're trying to use that to try and make AEW seem superior and better all of a sudden. And there's not real evidence to that. But what there is evidence for is that Dave Meltzer is a shill for AEW. We played a clip weeks back about him getting a call from Tony Khan live on the air. And we have him talking about the time in 2019 when he didn't like an episode of Dynamite and he dogged it. And he got a phone call from Tony Khan himself.
And it just was like, basically, I appreciate what you said, and we're going to make it better. Mm-hmm. And, 2 weeks later, he had a great TV show, and it did get better.
So Meltzer's admitting here that Tony Khan tries to please Dave Meltzer, or that since that conversation, Tony Khan has been paying Dave Meltzer to be a shill because for the past 6 years, Dave is always trying to put AEW in a better light while trying to make WWE look in a worse light. Now, MVP was on some Mark's podcast over the past week that got a little heated when Dave Meltzer came up. But MVP is talking about the dirt sheets and these journalists in the pro wrestling that aren't real journalists making up a story about him and Mike Bailey not getting along in AEW.
That whole thing was preposterous. That MVP doesn't like Mike Bailey, and that I don't have a problem with him. He's one of the nicest guys around.
Hey, sweetheart.
Yeah, I have no problem. I don't know where that came from.
So in clearing up that story breaking to try and dog on MVP, that does get into the main topic of these liars in the dirt sheets, and Meltzer is Mr. Dirt Sheets. He invented the concept of in that with pro wrestling. So let's just listen to more of MVP get heated when the nerdy interviewer brings up liking Dave Meltzer.
Where that started, I have no idea, because that wasn't a real thing. And as we mocked it and made a joke out of it, and now every time we see each other, say, fuck you, Speedball. Fuck you too, MVP. We get along fine. I got a lot of respect for the guy. He's a tremendous athlete, and he's very passionate, and he loves what he does. So fuck the dirt sheets.
I like Dave. Dave and I are good friends.
First of all, this guy, I don't know who he is, and I don't remember the name of the podcast, and I don't want to promote it anyway, but he has one of the nerdiest voices that you will ever hear.
I like Dave. Dave and I are good friends.
Hello, I'm Super Dork.
And of course, he's going to bat for the biggest old fool in pro wrestling. But some of the things that he says in defense of Dave Meltzer is honestly a little bit infuriating. And I don't know how MVP held his composure as he did.
I like Dave. Dave and I are good friends.
No,
but
fuck him.
But what? No. So explain
Fuck
that.
him.
Explain the wrestler relationship with Dave Meltzer, because I look at Dave.
He's a leech.
How so? Because I look
What
at Dave
is he-
real quick. I look at Dave as the most important historian that we have, and as the guy that for 40, 45 years now has. As a reporter, reports what he hears, but as a historian, he's the person that continues to tell the accurate story of professional wrestling, at least the most accurate story of professional wrestling.
But does he really tell the accurate story, or does he tell it from his point of view?
Who does it better than him?
His bias.
Saying in 2025 that Dave Meltzer tells the most accurate story of pro wrestling is truly as asinine of a statement than something that Dave Meltzer himself would make. Dave Meltzer is still the guy who brings up all these dirt sheet rumors and is proved wrong over and over and over these days, but that's the guy that's accurately representing professional wrestling. He said just a week ago before the Cena match that Cena and Gunther were actually going to open the show. That was Dave Meltzer's big reporting. He was, of course, dead wrong because, of course, Cena was going to close the show for his event, his last match. Everything MVP says about Dave Meltzer is right here. Everything this Mark says about Dave Meltzer is everything that is wrong with pro wrestling. And it's why people need to always try and hype up AEWs, because all these people in the media have listened to Dave Meltzer's concepts of pro wrestling for such a long time that they bought into it. Dave Meltzer's concept of pro wrestling was that it put the wrestling first and it will be the draw. Have all these matches with move after move after move that don't mean shit, and that will be the draw. And AEW doesn't draw, so he's been wrong all along. But this is why they defend it.
As Dave gets older and eventually will stop doing this, I think we're reaching a very dangerous point where the story of pro wrestling is
We've
going to be
already
told
reached
by...
the dangerous point
How so?
where you have young wrestlers that are wrestling for an audience of one, hoping to get a star rating.
Do you think that's a real thing that happens?
Absolutely.
Yes, of course, there are all these wrestlers, particularly a lot in AEW, that try and get star ratings over making money. That is definitely a concept that has become more and more in pro wrestling over the years, unfortunately. But also, this guy saying he's scared what will happen to pro wrestling when Dave Meltzer retires. I can tell you, it will get better. When Meltzer finally retires and we don't have to have all of these weirdos pay Dave Meltzer for wrong information, like John Cena is going to open the show of his last event ever, maybe the fan base can actually get their brains back. And that brings me to the Sports Illustrated Pro Wrestling Awards of 2025. And this fallow Dave Meltzer lover, Jon Alba, who is probably also paid off by Tony Khan, because instead of, trying to have matches that mean more, instead of trying to have consistent storytelling, instead of trying to make the women's division in AEW actually more viable, instead of trying to make stories that people want to see so that your ticket sales go up, Tony Khan just tries to pay off people to kiss his ass and kiss AEW's ass instead of putting in the work to make his product better. And so Sports Illustrated tried to make AEW out to have this great year. But what really happened here was, because WWE finally had a down year creatively after the past few years, they see it as a chance to hype up AEW. But the fact is, just because WWE had a bad year creatively, it didn't mean AEW had a better year creatively. That was definitely not the case. So some of these things that they gave out, awards in general are dumb. Every award show is shit. You could just Google the Golden Globes being paid off for who wins awards and see that awards don't mean shit. So this doesn't mean shit, but it is their way of trying to please Tony Khan and trying to hype up AEW falsely. Hangman Page, Wrestler of the Year, a joke. His title run did nothing for the company. Women's Wrestler of the Year, Mercedes Moné. Fine. I'm not going to sit here and rally against that. I won't rally against Kyle Fletcher as Breakout Star of the Year. I won't even rally against Io Sky, Rhea Ripley, Bianca Belair getting Match of the Year. The one that annoyed me was the Story of the Year going to Hangman Page's redemption arc. A face turn is not a storyline. I imagine that most hardcore AEW fans only watch pro wrestling. I can't imagine that they actually watch other television that have actual written storylines and sit there and think that AEW actually produces storytelling, because they don't 9 times out of 10. They had a great feud with Hangman Page and Swerve Strickland years back. But just because that was an actual decent story from the company, just because of that doesn't mean that Hangman turning face was an actual great story. So that's when I found these awards to be a sham when I saw that one. Same goes to Rivalry of the Year, Hangman Page and Jon Moxley. Jon Moxley is one of the most stalest things in professional wrestling, but he gets Rivalry of the Year. I would be more for the hype of AEW if I actually thought it was getting better, if I actually thought Tony Khan was trying to change the TV show to make it more watchable, to, actually get more fans to the show. AEW's in a spot where they're now struggling in the United States to get 2,000 people to their shows. They went from struggling to get 8,000 a few years ago, to struggling to get 4,000 to 5,000, to struggling to get 2,000 to 3,000. It's now struggling to get 2,000. That's not good. Something is wrong there. I've gone on longer than I wanted to. I do want to bring one more thing up, though, because to just truly prove that there are a lot of marks within the actual business that aren't just journalists, that aren't just fans. Dax of FTR was wearing a JD from New York t-shirt. And JD from New York is someone who is basically a poor man's Stephen A. Smith. He tries to get people heated up for his opinions. It's to get people to either hate watch him because of his opinions, or to give these hot takes that people might agree with and find entertaining. And JD from New York is entertaining. He got Dax here when it came to Dax wearing a shirt that Dax made himself of JD from New York on his own shirt. when JD can say, I don't have any shirts of FTR, is an own. Why are the wrestlers so enamored with the journalists that are in professional wrestling? It should always be the other way around. The journalists and the fans should want to root for and like and be entertained by the wrestlers. But we've come to a point when people are trying to have matches for star ratings that Dave Meltzer might give them, even though he's getting old and hasn't been in tune with what actually makes good television in such a very long time. And now we have a wrestler making a t-shirt of JD from New York. Like it's some own that he put JD on a t-shirt of a guy looking in on the party. He's actually putting over JD from New York here. This was insane to me to see. A pro wrestler wearing a t-shirt that he made himself of a journalist in pro wrestling. We've lost the plot. The pro wrestling world has lost the plot so badly. And that's why I said earlier, if and when Dave Meltzer ever retires, it's actually going to be for the betterment of pro wrestling.